do this once. But now, for some reason, I'm not hearing my own audio, so I'm just gonna roll with it. There we go. There it is. Okay. Yeah, okay, so I figured it out. Sometimes, for whatever reason, there's an audio delay. There's like huge, like minutes. I don't know why. Okay, well, we're gonna hang in there with me while I get used to this. This is something I want to incorporate to the channel. You know, the reason I created this channel to begin with was, there's a little bit of a story there. One, you sort of see, I don't know if it's an awakening. What do you want to call it? You know, you see theology, things that touch on theology are kind of, being talked about in strange places, which is why I do some Joe Rogan stuff, some Russel Brand stuff, some Jordan Peterson. Maybe Jordan Peterson is not as strange, but I don't want to do reaction videos. That was my thing. It's like, I want to change the internet. We want to change the internet. We're going to say, okay, is it possible? Maybe this is an experiment. Is it possible that the internet could be a place for people to find good dialogue, to come into contact with one another, with regards to meaningful topics and meaningful conversation, rather than what kind of digital media, digital technology seems to be creating, which is just two opposite poles. Maybe there's a few options out there, but it's just people posting and then other people reacting. And so live streaming is the next phase of this channel. And that's a way to create dialogue. That's a way to connect with people more and more. If you are familiar at all with Paul Vanderklay and his channel, I really do I'm sort of taking notes on his content and what he does. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed about Paul in sort of the brief time that I've watched his content is his live streams that he does. It just brings people in and engages in conversation around meaningful things. So that's why we're here. Thank you for bearing with me as I kind of learn the ropes as far as live streaming is concerned. And yeah, so this is kind of the evolution of the channel. We're moving forward. We're going to be doing more lives. This is the third live streaming. I'm going to do my best to be consistent on Wednesday afternoons. I know it's a random time for most people, but it is the time that works best for me for the most part. So the other thing we want to do is kind of just take an opportunity to go behind the scenes, backstage, pull back the curtain a little bit. So I'm going to kind of rehash what I posted. And part of the reason here is even though I do some long form content, the podcast episodes that I do are about an hour long. 45 minutes is maybe the sweet spot, but it does seem, particularly with some of these topics, it's just really hard to do it justice in a short amount of time. And again, we're here sort of attempting to transform the internet. I realize that at least historically, people are looking for bits and bytes and short little things that they can kind of digest. And for me, I don't find that to be the case. I really enjoy long form discussions. And so there's always more that can be said when it comes to this topic. And I opened up a bit of a can of worms, I guess, or I went down a rabbit hole here with kind of this Christianity and paganism topic. It was far more in depth than I had realized. I did a master's degree in Christian and classical studies where I did look at this subject. I'm fascinated by this. And so we would compare, Plato and Augustine. We would compare Aristotle and Aquinas, and we would look at kind of these themes that even Christians are picking up on that are being talked about in what would be called sort of the pagan world. And so this kind of pagan Christian conversation is one I'm familiar with, and yet I'm realizing there's a lot more to it. And I really appreciate, I'm going to get to a video here. And again, this will be a sort of a test because I haven't really done any tech yet during the live stream. So we're going to watch a Jonathan Pageau video because I found it really funny. I don't know, ironic, maybe providential that 9 days ago, I put out this podcast on the mysterious origins of Christianity, going over Joe Rogan and Brian Murarescu's conversation, where Brian Murarescu talks about what he calls the pagan Christian continuity hypothesis. And basically, he's drawing a line, from paganism to Christianity in order to explain the origins of Christianity or the origins of some of the sacraments that Christianity has. So particularly the Eucharist, particularly connecting that to some Greek mythology or sort of mystery religions and things like that. And I found that fascinating. I found that conversation fascinating. So of course I wanted to dialogue with it. I wanted to engage with it. And a couple of days later, Ruslan, who's a Christian YouTuber in the Christian YouTube space, has a huge channel, posted on the same conversation, but I felt really missed something. And so I was going to move on and I was going to do some other podcast content, but I decided to make a short video, just sort of, again, engaging with this conversation through sort of Ruslan's comments, which I thought very much, he came across as sounding like he believed Brian Murarescu was giving Joe Rogan sort of historical evidence for biblical Christianity. And that's not, that's not what Murarescu was doing. That doesn't seem to be Murarescu's thesis. And yet Ruslan sort of picked up on that topic and kind of made it sound like that. So I felt like there was some stuff that needed to be said there that would help the conversation. Again, not trying to be sort of antagonistic, not trying to sort of have reaction videos or debate or anything like that, but really carry the conversation forward. So I wrestled with this, and I think this is key as I learn about digital media and what I'm doing with this podcast is I am part-time, when I do this. So I see things happening, whether it be on the news, whether it be, maybe with Joe Rogan, some of these people that I engage with, and my knee-jerk reaction is to like, oh man, I want to jump on that, I got to jump on that and sort of strike while the iron is hot. That's kind of how things go on the internet, and yet for me, I sit back and I go, okay, what do I have to add to that conversation? What do I want to bring to this audience? And so I take a little bit more of a longer time maybe to think through these things. And I don't, and of course, I'm not a full time, so I'm not going to be able to just get to it very fast. And so I thought about it, Ruslan came out with his video. I posted my video on Monday. He posted his video on Wednesday. And I waited until the next week to post a video. I recorded it and then I sat on it. And I wanted to take some time to think about how I presented myself in that. Because again, I don't want to create tit for tat, debate, even though I'm going to disagree with Brian Murarescu, I'm disagreeing with Joe Rogan. And I do think that Ruslan kind of missed something. It seemed like he was quick to put out that episode on the Joe Rogan podcast and maybe didn't watch the whole podcast or wasn't familiar with Brian Murarescu's work. There was just stuff there that I thought, for the people that watched that video from Ruslan, I do think, and it is unfortunate because if you look at his page and you look at this video, it's going to play if I push on it. So let me, what you'll get is an ad because I don't have YouTube Premium. But there's some comments, and maybe I could get to that here in a little while. But there are some comments there that it did seem like people misunderstood what was going on between Joe Rogan and Brian Murarescu, and feeling like, once again, Joe Rogan was being confronted with sort of historical or biblical Christianity, which he really wasn't. Brian, and I pointed this out in my own video, Brian is not pointing to the person of Jesus as an explanation for the origins of Christianity or the Christian church. He's pointing to these pagan mystery religions. So there's that. I am learning. This whole project is, in a sense, an experiment again to see if we can create beneficial dialogue around meaningful things. I think theology is the most important topic we can talk about. I think there's a flow to history and culture rooted in the way people think about God, because what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. It will determine how you live and all your final decisions in life. And so this is, I think, the most meaningful thing that we can talk about. So the evolution of the Strange Theology channel has a lot to do with my own sense of how to use that as a tool. And so there may be times when I jump on a topic that's and go quick into something, and then maybe do a follow-up as I maybe dig deeper. But yeah, I sat on this one. I sat on this kind of discussion that I did with Ruslan. And part of that was to kind of get a sense of, okay, was I being reactionary or was I being thoughtful in my response? Ultimately, I posted it. We'll see. And I actually want to get to some of the comments on this one because I think they're helpful. So, yeah, welcome. I actually do enjoy the live stream format. So if you're hanging out there with us, give me a shout out in the chat. Hit the like button, do all that stuff, because again, this is part of learning, particularly YouTube. I mean, I'm on Spotify and I'm in those other places, but particularly when it comes to YouTube, you have to wonder, what is YouTube feeding to people? What is sort of their motivations? And although I think this is a deep and meaningful subject, there's a lot of people out there having theological conversations. This is educational. It's not necessarily entertainment. I hope it can be entertaining. I hope it can be inspiring, things like that. But I have moved from doing shorts. I did quite a few shorts just as I was, learning how to do YouTube and posting things. And the shorts were very revealing to me as to what YouTube wants me to put out and what YouTube does not want me to put out. And I've even done some commentary on my Twitter or X account based off of, you look at particularly, I don't necessarily want to go down this rabbit hole, but the absolute authoritarian elite videos from like Francis Schaeffer get nothing because you don't want to shine light on the fact that there's this technocratic authoritarian elite on a platform that may have something to do with that technocracy. But particularly, I thought this Nimrod's plan one was really interesting in this one from Sean Ryan's, but it was really interesting to see how YouTube treated that, and how YouTube treats things sort of moving forward as I move away sort of from the shorts into more live streams and stuff like that. I do enjoy it. I want to say I probably enjoy doing a live stream more than a shorts video. But at the same time, any types of like comments, share. I think sharing is really key to YouTube. I don't know what they do with that in the algorithm of like, oh, this got shared 50 times. Maybe I should bump it up in the algorithm. It still seems like they rely on like likes and comments to boost the algorithm. I don't know. Maybe I have to think about that, But yeah, so thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing this with your friends, sharing it with people who I think would benefit, or you think would benefit from meaningful conversation. So we're going to get into this Jonathan Pageau video here in a second. We'll see how it works. Bringing in some tech here. Okay, so on the topic of paganism and Christianity, I thought it was really interesting that Joe Rogan has this conversation with Brian Murray Rescue. I commented. I'm sure other people did, but then I noticed that Ruslan commented on it, and then a couple days later, Jonathan Pageau is having this conversation with Father Andrew Damick, and what was it? This was, I think, on Thursday or Friday. So I hadn't seen this. I really wish I had seen this when I was making that Ruslan video, because I think it's just perfect. But it's also just kind of funny that this conversation is coming up. I mean, probably what YouTube wants you to be talking about right now is the conflict in the Middle East, and yet here's this other conversation going on about paganism and Christianity. So this video is called Redeeming Pagan Symbolism. I did leave a link to this in the description of the video if you want to check it out. But again, bear with me as I think this will work. Let me know if the audio doesn't come through. But I think their comments here are fascinating. Let me make sure I'm not too loud in myself. Okay, good.
If you listen to some of the arguments that you've heard when you were younger, like that you heard people say, you had these two arguments. One was Christianity is just syncretism. It's all just borrowing from pagans, whatever. And then the other one is Christianity destroyed all the ancient cults. They went in, they broke everything, and they ruined the whole Christian world. It's like, you can't have those two at the same time. The actual reality is that it's neither of those.
Yeah, that's right.
It's neither of those.
That's
and it's
right.
Christianity, as Christianity took hold, it integrated the things it could integrate. It kind of let fall to the side the things that couldn't be integrated. And it ended up with a world that was based on the ancient pagan world in terms of a lot of the forms, but using its meaning pointed towards God and towards Christ, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you hear what he's saying there, it's not that Christians just went in and destroyed pagan symbols and pagan, things, which of course did happen. And it's not that, like Brian Murray Rescue is sort of claiming, that Christianity came out of paganism. Again, Pageau's point is you can't have both. It's either or is there a third way? And I think that's that third way. And this is a great interview. They talk about a few examples. One of them that's maybe the most obvious or more popular is Paul, the Apostle Paul, in the book of Acts, at the Areopagus, where he quotes from Greek poets. So he pulls from the Greek culture, pagan. The poets that he's quoting are writing about Zeus. Okay, so what is Paul doing in that moment? He is identifying, not even he's identifying a bridge that he can use to engage in conversation with people who are of a different worldview, of course. But he's also acknowledging the fact that these pagan poets got something right in the way they viewed the world. And I think that other passage, and I'm sorry I don't have these off the top of my head, but when Jesus is talking to, Jesus is having a conversation, and the conversation goes back and forth, and he finally says, you are not far from the kingdom. So there's this idea that, okay, you're not in the kingdom, but Jesus doesn't rebuke the guy for not being in the kingdom. He sort of encourages, hey, you're not far from the kingdom. Keep thinking about these things. Keep working on these things. And so, you think of, and go back to Paul and the Areopagus, quoting from Greek poets. He's building a bridge, but he's also identifying that these poets were not far from the kingdom. Now, as soon as I say that, it sounds wrong in my head of okay, I guess if you're off by a little bit, aren't you off by a mile? Maybe that there's something to that. But what I see is that there is that sense of common grace that, you can even think of Romans. Gosh, is it Roman? It's Romans 1. Do I want to see? This is one of my fears here with doing live stream. I sort of start to think about these things on the fly, and then it's like I am a little bit worried that me sort of typing around and looking up references and things like that. It's like it's downtime, and so maybe it doesn't make for great live stream content. Hopefully, we can hang in there with it. But I always thought that this was talking to the Jews, for they knew God. Because what is known about God is evident. For the wrath of God this is Romans chapter 1, this is 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men that suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. So they're without excuse. Okay, so there's that. And then I always thought that this maybe was talking about the Jews, but maybe he's not. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God. Is it possible that that's not written to the I don't know, not written to the Jews, but to everybody, to these pagans that are kind of, again, looking at what God has created and understanding something about God. They did not honor him as God or give thanks. And let me know, like, share your comments if you're tracking along. Again, we're learning. We're students of theology here. We each have our expertise. So maybe you have a different interpretation of this passage. Maybe it's like very clear to you, like, oh no, Pete, he's clearly addressing the Jews in Rome right now. But yeah, anyway, so God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for the image and form of corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creatures. Okay. There's obviously more we could say on the book of Romans, but this idea of common grace, that there are things evident about God, and these pagan poets are picking up on that. What is that? Is that Acts? Shoot. Yeah, I should definitely have that reference. I'm sure I have it written down somewhere. Paul at the Areopagus. Somebody have it? It's down there. It's down there somewhere. Chapter like 12. He's quoting these Greek poets, and you know what's interesting too is it's actually like it's like a fairly famous passage, right? And that I think most people don't really attribute to paganism. It's Acts 17. Like if you were to say that this was a pagan, this Bible passage came from a pagan poet, I don't know, you'd probably be a little confused. For in him we live and move and exist. Even some of your own poets have said, for we are also his children. This passage is originally about Zeus. In him we live and move and exist, or have our being. He's paraphrasing that. And then he quotes another poet here, for we are his children. These are both about Zeus originally, but now they're in scripture. Now they're canonized. So it's like you look at it in one way and you're like, oh, Paul, why, shouldn't he have known better, not to use these pagan poets, because it would end up becoming canonized. So maybe there's something to that. These poets were picking up on something. Paul understood that. He saw that. He used that to say, okay, you guys are not far from the kingdom. You guys are not far. And I can not only build a bridge, but I can also acknowledge where in your thinking, we think the same way. We're not as, it's not as, like Jonathan is saying, like Jonathan Pageau is saying, it's not that Christians just went into these pagan places and destroyed all this paganism. Yes, certainly that did happen. it's not just that Christians came out of paganism, like Brian Murarescu is saying, but that Christians identified what they could use within this Hellenistic world, within this sort of pagan world, and said, hey, that's actually something. And Paul famously says, I'm here to talk to you about this unknown God, the altar to an unknown God. Okay, let's talk about that unknown God. And also that Paul was familiar enough with that Greek poetry. So there you have it. Like, when I was a student in high school, this is when I gave my life to the Lord, and I started going to church, started going to youth group, and it was like, oh, you got to burn all your CDs, all that pagan music or all that secular music. That was the word, secular music. And here, Paul, it's almost like he's got secular CDs. He's listening to them. He's got these Greek poets. He has their works, and he's reading them. He's familiarizing himself with them. He's a student. He may have even enjoyed this. And so I think there's more to this Christian pagan conversation, and maybe I'm not doing the best at it. So I hope that I can lend to the conversation more and more as I sort of mature in my thinking about it. But it's really interesting. I find Jonathan Pageau's take on this to be very healthy, very, very balanced, just realizing that Christians used what they could that was not completely antithetical to what they believed, right? So that's what was key, is the places where you can build a bridge, you do. And you identify where these people are not that far off. So, excuse me. All right, with that, I want to go in and actually encourage you guys. I want to encourage a couple of you. Thank you guys for commenting on my videos. Thank you. And even with that, I think it's key to, I just said we're not, I would be cautious of anybody that calls themselves a expert in theology. Certainly there are people that have expertise and we should learn from them. I mean, I'd love to have a theology mentor. But there's always something to be learned when it comes to theology, because we are investigating theology from a finite mind. So we're investigating the infinite with a finite mind. And I think that that's where community really comes in. I think that again, my encouragement with regards to this channel is that it would create dialogue, that we would learn from one another. And so maybe I can kind of collect some of these things and put them into videos. I'm not going to say everything that needs to be said. And so that's where I'm relying on you guys to provide some commentary. And I want to encourage, because it does seem like, let me make sure I can play this without it. Yeah, of course, you see it. Free ad from YouTube there. Sorry. I don't have YouTube Premium or anything like that. So it just is what it is. So I wanted to look at some of these comments and just kind of encourage you guys, because it did seem like maybe not knowing how I would react. There was this sense of like, hey, I don't want to be rude here, but you really need to fill in the blanks. Don't ever feel like you're being rude telling me I need to fill in the blanks, because that's why we're here. We're literally here. You are here to fill in the blanks. And so, Howard, I really appreciate this comment. I've appreciated some of more of your comments as well. But it's good that you're examining these conversations, nailing the distinctives between paganism and Christian faith and practice. You also need to take into account the early churches and the first reformers' view of the sacraments themselves, as outlined by the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 10. 100%. This is a great passage. It's an important passage that is so often overlooked by modern evangelicals on this issue, but it's clearly key to the theology of Martin Luther and these reformers. It's an issue that clearly needs deeper discussion. Thank you, Howard, for this. Thank you, for sharing that. And I think, I can. Oh, sorry, huge YouTube channel, and there was a way I thought you could look at how people comment. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But oftentimes you can see how people comment on a channel. And so that's really helpful. Like if you're forming community and you come across somebody who's you're like, whoa, I really appreciate that comment. You can oftentimes see other comments that person has made on a channel. But anyway, so look into that, because Howard has had a few comments on my channel that I think are really helpful. So thank you for this one. And yeah, I will look into, I'm still I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of gaps in my Christian experience. I didn't grow up in the church. And so, yeah, I'm still very much a student of theology. I really take that. I think we should approach theology with boldness and humility. Boldness because God has revealed himself to us, but humility because we are finite and we are exploring the infinite. And communion has always been one of those things that I'm like, what are we doing here? And there is kind of, maybe there's a contrast a little bit in how someone like Martin Luther, obviously this issue, particularly 1 Corinthians 10 was really important. Actually, I'm going to keep my headphones on just to make sure I'm not playing something. I'm going to make sure I'm going to mute this. But, and yet, and you see like maybe sort of Western people, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here. That question of what is communion is very important. What is it? What are we doing? What are we partaking of? Is it the actual body and blood? Is Jesus with the body? There's all these conversations. And yet I believe, and again, I could be misrepresenting, in other places, they would acknowledge the mystery there. Say, when you say, behold the body and blood of Christ, that's what we sort of look at it that way. But in other churches, they would say, behold the mysterious body and blood of Christ. So there's that mystery there, where maybe it's not as much of an issue. I don't know, because they realize I don't know that we fully know what we're doing here. Yeah. Well, and thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. Lynn has got some comments as well that I've appreciated. And yeah, just like the intersection of paganism and the Greek world. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. And how did Christianity utilize some of the work that was going on in the Hellenistic world at the time? Because you think about it like this. Obviously, God prepared for the Messiah through the Hebrew people, right? The Messiah came through the Hebrew people. So God did a lot of work. Like Israel is my son, my chosen people. Like God is very intimate with the people of Israel. And so we often associate a lot of God's work in history leading up to the Messiah with the Hebrew people, and rightly so. But then there's this whole other thing that you start to recognize within the Hellenistic world, within Greek mythology, that's like, is that God at work within the minds of the Hellenistic world to also prepare them for the Messiah? Because then you think, like, why did Christianity just take off like wildfire with the Gentiles? And some of the, like, historically around the first church, it was like, obviously Jews were also coming to Christianity and acknowledging Jesus as the Messiah. But there was this sort of resistance there. I mean, Paul even talks about it. He says there's a partial hardening of the heart that has taken place. And so there seems to be this resistance going on in sort of the Hebrew culture at the time that didn't exist within the Hellenistic culture at the time. And I wonder if part of the reason is that God providentially prepared the Hellenistic world for the Messiah, for the gospel. In the Brian Murray Rescue video that I did, well, actually, was it? Oh no, it was last week's live stream. We talked about the Bacchus, and that's kind of the same thing. There's this play where this God is represented by bread and grapes. So there was something going on, and I would say that it's sort of God providentially orchestrating the history, the poetry, the thinking, the worldview development within the Hellenistic world, so that when the gospel was revealed to them, they were ready for it. That's what it seems to be taking place. So, how you want to phrase that could be, you could get technical there. Was it, and that's what Jonathan Pageau's video I think is really good about. Is it Christian sort of is it Christian synchronism with Greek mythology? No, it's really not. But there seems to be some truth within that Greek mythology that the Christians were latching onto and saying, actually, this is not far from what we're saying. And so that's what Paul does in Acts. What was it, Acts 14? Where were we? My ADD sets in 17. So I appreciate the comments. And then Neutrino, I think I got you. This is good too. And again, if you don't feel comfortable viewing yourself as a real Christian, that's your concern for the most part. He says, I enjoy your work. I appreciate it. And I don't wish to be disrespectful. But I encourage you to look into the cult of Mithras that comes out of Zionism. So again, this and the Bacchus so like this is really helpful stuff. Comments are very helpful because what Neutrino is saying. He's like this is like I don't know how would we? It's like a team sport. Maybe that's a good comparison. It's like this is. I think when we're doing theology, it has to be done in community. It can't just be like, and I think maybe this has been to the detriment of sort of maybe Western modernism, is that we rely on this sort of expert to show up and maybe tell us what to think about our theology. And I don't want, and that's not me. I think that we can learn a lot from each other. So yeah, I would say, let's look into this. The cult of Mithras, that does ring a bell. I wonder if I have come across it. Of course, Dionysius and the Bacchus, we talked about that last week. The Dead Sea Scrolls are fascinating, and I want to do more work in this area. The Qumran people, that stuff is fascinating. So there's all kinds of anyway, I wanted to give Neutrino a shout out just to say, don't ever feel bad about coming into leaving a comment, coming into the live stream with some other context, something that would lend to the conversation, even if you're disagreeing. I don't find that to be disrespectful. I really appreciate your comment here. I appreciate you being sensitive to me. And I think as we learn more about each other, hopefully you'll see it. I have a pretty thick skin. I have convictions in certain areas that I'm very convinced of. But even then, the goal here is the truth, right? And I don't believe in Christianity because I want to believe in Christianity. I believe in Christianity because in my search for truth, Christianity is the thing that seemed to not only line up with, but looks like the truth. It has, whatever you want to do. It's correspondent, coherence, empirical adequacy. You could do those tests if you want. I think Christianity passes all of those. I think the more and more I grow in this, the more and more I just don't see any other way. So please leave your comments and just know that I won't ever feel disrespected. I really want this place. I want to change the internet. I want this place to be a community and environment where we can leave comments with one another. I was in my small group. It was 2 weeks ago, and one of the people in my small group sort of called out the other one. But he was like, "Man, I love you. That's why I want to disagree with you right here, because I want to challenge you in something." And I just thought that kind of thing is beautiful. So thank you for that. And there was another comment in. Let me see if I can get there, because I do appreciate this. And again, I'll have to. Yeah, whatever. Sorry for free ads there. YouTube is double dipping here with my live stream, but if you want to support the channel so that we can have a YouTube premium, you can do that. Abram Josiah, hey, thanks for being here. I feel like this dude commenting, that's me, doesn't have any experience with psychedelics and sounds fairly uninformed as to what a transcendent experience can be, and instead is arguing from an ideological point of view. Let me address the ideological point of view thing really quick here, because I think that theology is one of the things that allows me not to be ideological. And that's just how I see it. I see theology as almost like the brakes to ideology. I think that if you're doing, you can't really do theology ideologically. I know people do. I just don't think that their theology is very good when they do it that way. You have to go. This is why theology is called the queen of the sciences. You enter into theology knowing full well that you will never master this subject, knowing full well that there will always be more to learn because you're finite, and that puts you in a place of teachability so that you can learn all the other disciplines. It's that starting point of teachability that I think we're missing in kind of this, I don't know, technological world where we're trying to communicate meaningful things through digital platforms. And so, so again, there's just this sort of reaction. And you notice, I mean, think about it like this. I mean, this is my channel, Abram. Like, I feel like this dude commenting, yeah, that's me. Like, you're leaving a comment on my channel, not some dude. Like, I'm not an AI. So I feel like this dude, Pete, you could just call me Pete if you want to, or you can call me Strange Theology. And when I get my PhD, you can call me Dr. Strange. I feel like this dude commenting doesn't have any experience. So again, this is just like, engage with me, man. If you feel that way, engage with me. I really do try not to approach theology ideologically. I think that that's a bad way to approach theology. Now, he's more commenting on the psychedelic thing, which is not the point of my video. My video is not necessarily to go into psychedelics, which I have any expertise in, except, well, I mean, I can get to some of that, but the point of the video was to be conversant with Brian Murarescu's thesis, which is that Christianity, in particular the sacrament of the Eucharist, came out of the Eleusinian mystery cult and their practices that had to do with drinking ergot, or they think maybe drinking a substance that was laced with ergot. But again, it's pretty thin if you want to go back and look at that. I mean, I did a full hour on that topic, and it was pretty clear that I'm not necessarily trying to comment about psychedelics. And maybe I'd be curious, Abram, if you're around, how far did you get into the video? Or did you learn that I was a Christian and then basically say, oh, you don't have any experience with psychedelics, and you don't know what a transcendent experience can be? I would 100% disagree with that. I didn't share any of my testimony in that video, again, because I wasn't necessarily trying to engage with Brian Murarescu's sort of thesis here and not get too much into the weeds of the psychedelics. However, Joe Rogan just had Graham Hancock on, and so I may get into the weeds here. Let's see. It's his YouTube channel. So if you understand how Joe Rogan, he's on Spotify. It's exclusively on Spotify, and so I think it's just the Powerful JRE is the YouTube channel that you would have to go to if you want to see any of the clips from Joe Rogan. And let's see, recently he just did another long form discussion with Graham Hancock, which I find fascinating. About half of that conversation has to do with ancient history and archaeology and some of the discoveries that they're making that really challenge the narrative about primitive human beings, which I find fascinating because as a Christian, I think humanity began in the Garden of Eden, which, a lot of people are looking for Atlantis right now. I think they're really looking for the Garden of Eden. I think we all are to some degree. And so, of course, I believe humanity did not start from some primitive, maybe, like it doesn't change my theology, but it seems like what Adam was doing in the garden was taxonomy, which is a very technical branch of science. He has to understand language. Excuse me. I don't have like a cough button, so forgive me. It has to do with language, linguistics. It has to do, obviously, with understanding the animals and their behaviors. And so, I think I've said this in a past video, but there was something, and I'm using English here, so it's a bad example, but there was something there's an elephantness to the elephant, and we use the word elephant to describe that elephantness. And so that's what Adam was doing. And so, in a sense, language is one of the frameworks through which we see reality. So I look at what Adam was doing in the garden. I think this is very technical stuff. This is not primitive stuff. And so when Joe Rogan has Graham Hancock on, I get excited because they're talking about an alternate history where humanity, as you go back in history, actually seems to be very, very advanced. Fascinating stuff. The other half of this interview has to do with DMT and psychedelics and the fact that some people are using DMT to help them pass with end-of-life kind of stress and trauma. That is a conversation worth having. And so I was not in the Brian Murray Rescue interview, although they were talking about psychedelics, more so than anything, I was trying to engage with the origins of Christianity rather than the topic of psychedelics. Now, this person is fairly uninformed on what a transcendent experience can be. Again, I disagree with that. I think that Christians have come into contact with the person of God through Jesus. Like that is a transcendent experience. I think prayer is can be a very powerful transcendent experience. I think it can also be very subtle, and I pointed this out, I think, in one of the last videos. There's a point at which God is not in the earthquake or the fire, but he's in the still small voice. And then you look at Acts, and God is in the earthquake and the fire. So there's times when your experience with God can be very profound, and then there's times when your experience with God can be very subtle. But yeah, I have had experiences in my life that I would call a transcendent experience. I do not have, as far as I know, any experience with psychedelics, but I have had moments in my life where, because of some medications I was on, I was hallucinating. So this is a terrifying experience. And so yeah, again, just engage with me, Abram, if you want to come back in. I appreciate all the comments. I don't even not appreciate this one because it causes me to think, okay, is there anything in my approach or anything in my presentation that is ideological? Am I holding on to something because I just have this ideology that I want to hold on to and I want to preserve that ideology? Or am I pursuing the truth? So thank you for that comment. And I don't remember what. Yeah, I said my response to him was my experiences with the person of Jesus. And what's funny is Brian Murray Rescue, who wrote the book connecting Christianity to this psychedelic experience, also has not had a psychedelic experience. And he comes out and he says that. And he says, one of the reasons I wanted to write, I did not want to go into any sort of psychedelic experience was while I was writing the book, is I didn't want that to interfere with any of the way I was writing or any of the sort of scholarly authority that maybe he would have because he hadn't been influenced by psychedelics. So Brian Murray Rescue has not had a psychedelic experience, and yet he's the one that wrote the book. So whatever. So anyway, that's some of the comments. That's one of the things I want to do here during these live streams. One, I want to pull back the curtain and kind of get to anything that we didn't get to in some of these previous videos, because again, like I said, there's always sort of feels like there's pieces that I have to leave out. And the other thing is to engage with you guys as you leave comments, but also if you're here live and you have a question or you have a comment, this would be one of those places to do that is, as the channel matures a little bit more, we would have more and more live stream dialogue, because that's, again, that's kind of the purpose of this channel, is to have dialogue around meaningful things. So I do plan to do, I've got a few other videos that I'm working on, and so I will work on those. I do plan to probably do the Joe Rogan, Graham Hancock interview. I've been wanting to do, Graham has some comments about pyramids that he made in his Netflix series, Ancient Apocalypse, which is a fascinating Netflix series. And there's a part there where he goes through all of the pyramids, but he just skips over the idea of the Tower of Babel. And so for me, in my mind, I'm like, okay, in Scripture, there's the story of the Tower of Babel. I think we're in Genesis 11, something like that. And God scatters these people, so they're building this ziggurat. They're building this pyramid, basically, and God's like, okay, hold on. Actually, the Bible Project did a good video on this as well, but so maybe we can kind of do a mashup conversation between Graham Hancock and the Bible Project. But to me, it just makes sense that there's pyramids all over the planet, because at one point everybody was trying to build a pyramid, and then God was like, hold on, you need to scatter. And so they scattered, and then they all tried to rebuild that pyramid that they were working on. So fascinating stuff, but you can't use the Netflix series, so maybe I could get some clips from it, but you can't. And so I want to engage with that. I'm holding off on the idea of engaging with the DMT, but they did have some interesting conversation there about just people at the end of their lives confronting death, and as a Christian, I would confront death very differently, and kind of the underlying angst there is the unknown, and so they're saying, well, let's give DMT to these people who are terminal, and help them adjust to this sort of reality that they're going to die. We're all going to die. So as a Christian, I think I would engage with that conversation a lot different. And I think there's something to that little bit of angst that we have, I think that's okay. I think confronting our mortality is okay. But there's this whole other interview with Jordan Peterson and Russel Brand that I wanted to get to, because it touches on Christian mysticism, so there's two sort of focuses that I could go. I could continue with sort of the kind of the theme that came up from this Brian Murr rescue interview, and continue the conversation between sort of Christianity and sort of, I don't know, paganism, but also this whole idea of psychedelics, or kind of jump ship on that and go into sort of Christian mysticism. So you'll know when I post it which one I decided, because I'm going to be gone for the weekend, and so I will not have a long form video out on Monday like I normally do, but we'll see. Maybe I can put out a clip or something like that. But I will be back on Wednesday of next week for a live stream. So thanks for hanging out, and I will catch you in the next one.